In the book, you give 15 techniques. Why 15 techniques, and how did you come across those techniques?
Well, what I did is, again, I was I've always been because my background is as a copywriter. That was my background before I came to the web. I've always been aware of the power of the headline. So what I did with this book is I kind of went to the source. I went to the best magazines, the best newspapers. But when it came to actually giving examples, what I was looking for, I was going to websites like Reddit, and I was using other research tools online to find out which headlines were rising to the top. Because when you go, typically if you go to Reddit or Dig, you see the headline and the ones that have been shared the most or voted up the most, rise to the top of the page. And it's kind of interesting because very often they rise up not because of the full body of the article, but because of the headline itself. So I was looking at different techniques people use. I was looking at techniques used across different categories, different kinds of businesses. I just researched hundreds of headlines, and then I picked out, I think it was about 45 in the end that were proven performers. So the headlines you see I use as an example in the book are headlines from the web. I think I made up or changed a couple just to illustrate a particular point. And I also make some suggestions within the body of the text in the book, like, hey, maybe another version of this headline could have been XYZ. So, what I did is I looked at proven performers, and then I analyze those and go through and describe why they work and how they can be adapted for different types of businesses and websites.
Right. So what we've got in the book then is 15 techniques, maybe 45 different examples of those techniques in action, and then in addition to that, suggestions of how they could have been done differently. That's really quite a lot of headlines you've packed in there.
Well, it's fun. I like headlines, and I like this particular project. I really leapt into because it seems to me it's a big untold story here. I read a lot about all kinds of aspects of marketing online and writing for the web and optimizing for search engines and linking, which is all necessary stuff. But there's very, very little talk about actually writing powerful content headlines that actually hook people and drive people into the text. And as you and I know, if I actually arrive on one of your pages from a Google search, and I read your headline, and I go, nah, and I click back to the search page. You and I know, and a lot of other people now know, that Google notices that. Google notices that I only spent 3 seconds on your page, and Google puts a black mark against your site, right? Mm-hmm. So, even from this crosses over. It's not just the power of the headline itself, but it's more important than ever to give people a reason to keep reading and keep people on the page for as long as possible. Because Google really is penalizing us now for those kind of fast bounces.
Right. Okay. Well, what you're saying about headlines is fascinating, and I think I talk to many businesses and people who produce content for the web, and very rarely do they bring up the topic of headlines. But I think the very first story that you told us, where someone is paid by a leading magazine just to write headlines, that's fantastic, and it shows you how important it is. They don't pay that money for no reason. No. They obviously do it because it helps their subscription, and I think that's
Absolutely.
Fantastic. The other thing I think that perhaps people in small business might think of, it's not enough then just to have a good headline. You've got to deliver on that headline as well.
Absolutely. And also, like some of the examples I give, and again, people may groan, but a headline that says something like 7 ways to whatever, people may groan, oh no, not the numeral at the beginning of the headline trick. Well, you see, a headline like that, first of all, it works extremely well when you offer someone 3 ways or 7 ways or 37 ways, whatever it is. And strangely, odd numbers work better than even numbers. Don't ask me why, but they do. You see, if I read that, it signals to me not only am I going to learn something interesting, but it also is far more likely now that I'm going to read down that page. Because if it says here are 7 ways, and if I arrive to that page because I am interested in the topic, then hey, I'm going to at least glance at all 7 of those ways. So I'm less likely to kind of bounce back to the Google search, and I'm more likely to spend more time on that page. So there are some very specific techniques in terms of writing headlines that encourage people to spend more time on the page. I mean, another very, very simple technique, and any copywriter knows this, is the approach where you say how to.
Yes.
And again, there is a promise there in the headline. There is a promise that if you read this whole page, you will learn how to, change your fuse box without electrocuting yourself, or whatever the topic is.
And is it possible then to combine the headlines, like for instance, 7 or how to do such and such in 5 easy steps? Is that a combination headline?
Yeah, and there are all kinds of combinations you can use. I mean, and there are things like something that's probably changed a great deal in the last few years is that thinking in terms of multimedia for your web pages is something people find attractive. They love to watch videos. They like to look at infographics. They like to look at charts and diagrams and tables. It breaks up the text. It's a different way to consume information, and people like it. Particularly video. So you flag that in the headline. You can say, a video of Nick and Ken riffing about headlines. Or you can have the headline and then in the square brackets at the end, video. I mean, you see this all over now, square brackets at the end, pic, infographic, video, in caps. It's there as part of headline design. It's there to catch people's attention. And they say, oh, look, a video. Yeah, so if you have 5 headlines listed on a page somewhere, and they're all roughly on the same topic, and one of them has open square brackets, video in caps, close square brackets at the end, that is the one that is going to get far more click-throughs because it's attractive. Oh, a video, I can watch a video. I don't have to do all that hard work reading.
Yeah, it's fantastic that.
Okay. So there are dozens of things to think about with the crafting of headlines and the nature of the content that follows, like in a how-to or 7 ways or using multimedia. It impacts the content itself, and it makes you think more carefully about the content itself. But like I say, very few people really pay sufficient attention to this side of things.
One of the things I think that you mentioned there, which I really like, is that you've really got to think about this. You can't go into autopilot and just fire out your 500-word article. You've really got to think about the content. You've got to think about the reader. You've got to think about the impact that you want to have with them.
Yeah, I mean, like, you write the headline and you think, hey, this is a great headline. Well, you stop and think, how will that do in a Twitter feed? Mm-hmm. It may look good and sound good on the page, but what happens when it's in isolation? Will it hook people? Will it make people click through?
Yeah. Well, as I read your book over the weekend, I just I've got my writing sorted out for the next month ahead in terms of just the ideas that I got there, and if I could share just with the audience the last one in your book, which is "Don't do this," and I thought that was great. Now, could I ask you to summarize for the audience here? Don't do this when you're writing headlines. What would be the points that you would make?
I would say don't just write a descriptive headline. Think of it as if you were a copy editor in a newspaper. Don't stop at one draft with your headline. Think about what your headline might look like in isolation, in a Twitter stream or in an RSS feed. If you strip away the rest of the content, is there a hook there that makes people want to keep reading? Is there some kind of mystery there? Are you driving some curiosity? You're making people feel, oh wow, I want to read more. So I guess the simplest habit to get out of is not to stop at the first draft. Pay attention. This is something that can make a huge difference. I mean, particularly if you're writing content as a matter of, in a way, to pre-sell. Very often, if you're pre-selling a product or service with information, the links through to your products or services will likely appear, not in the very first two lines of the page because you haven't shared that information yet. Those links will likely appear, after people are halfway down or even at the end of the content page. Well, those are important links to your actual products and service pages. No point if people don't read that far.
Yeah. Yep.
No point if the headline doesn't compel them to read the article and want to keep reading the article.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think one of the great things, the sense I got from reading the book is, this is a skill that you can learn.
Absolutely.
And you're giving us a lot of insights in terms of doing it. I think the other thing that's really important, and we've talked a lot about social media here, and I think that's because it's really important. But the thing I think that's great about social media is we get instant feedback. And so as we put our headlines out there, we can clearly see what works and what doesn't. And we can hone our own skills just with experience.
I mean, in fact, there are the most sophisticated creators of content out there are actually adjusting and testing headlines in real time. Like they're putting out an article with a particular headline, and over the course of minutes, because these companies have very high volume, this is the large media companies, and they're looking at click-throughs, they're looking at time spent on page, and over the course of a period of like 2 hours, they might change a headline 4 or 5 different times, and they're constantly seeking out the version that is most successful for them.
Wow! And then try and beat it the next day.
That's right. But this means taking a very professional view about headlines. It's not a casual first draft. It's as important as any other writing on your website.
Yes, and it's not a minority interest. It's something that anybody who calls them a writer should be interested in.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think anyone who's watching this has some interest in writing content, whether it be web pages or posts or whatever. And all of us need to pay attention to this. Right.
But Nick, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, and I'm sure that will make a great piece. Okay, all the best.
Yeah.
Bye now.
You take care.
And yourself.
Yeah, bye-bye.